Women, terrible women. For centuries, women were content to be housewives and mothers. Then authors began to put ideas in their heads that this was not enough. By 1900, we began to see the Dark Ages beginning with first wave feminism. Flappers, wearing increasingly short hairstyles and dresses, threatened the sanity and position of men. By 1920, disaster had struck in the form of the 19th Amendment, giving women the vote. To compound this, World War II put many women into men's roles, leaving the country overrun with women thinking they were in charge. The 1950s sought to correct this with psychoanalysis, putting blame for all of the negative things on women, but still unruly women ran rampant. By the 1960s, second wave feminism had claimed its hold, bringing with it a culture of revolution. By 1967, the New York Radical Women were formed as the first radical feminists. For the next 50 years, men worked to revert women to their rightful role, and now, as a reminder of the conflict from which they came, each district must offer up female authors as tribute for the Literacy Games. Welcome to the 25th Annual Literacy Games, and may the words be ever in your favor.
As you know, the country has been divided into 4 districts, each emulating the conditions of various time periods of women's history. Hailing from District 4, representing the late 18th century, is our pair of tributes, Jane Austen and Mary Shelley. It is from this district we found the beginnings of scientific discovery with the advent of the telescope, microscope, barometer, and thermometer. People like Robert Boyle, the advocate of chemistry, and Isaac Newton are the prominent figures in this district. The people have seen a decline in traditional religion and a shift of people to living in urbanized cities. In this district, women are confined to the domestic sphere of being a wife and mother. They have different standards of behavior than men and are punished far more severely. Because of this, women such as our tributes wrote using metaphors for their anger or with a pretense of a bubbly tone over deeper sarcastic wit. From District 3, modeled after the early to mid-19th century, our tributes are Charlotte Bronte and George Eliot. Women in this district grow up in an omnipresent state of industrialization, such as that of mid-19th century Britain. Women in this age were still being put in their rightful place as objects for the service of men, expected to be submissive and angelic. Women of this district are separated into 2 distinct groups, the pure and the evil, the Marys and the Eves. Hailing from District 2, representing the late 19th century, is our pair of tributes, Charlotte Perkins Gilman and Djuna Barnes. By this time in the history which this district is modeled after, women were beginning to heavily question their roles, and the first bout of the ugly monster of feminism began to rear its head. Women in this district, however, still have very few rights. Property laws and marriage laws give men ownership of their wives, and it's not even questionable behavior for a man to imprison his wife in their house. As a result, there's much underlying anger in many women's writing in this time. From District 1, the representation of the early to mid-20th century, come our last pair of tributes, Gwendolyn Brooks and Maya Angelou. This district is forever entrenched in the modernist period, which took place from approximately 1914 to 1939. Men in this district fear a female takeover and are overrun by the dangerous flappers in their short dresses and hairstyles with their excessive drinking and dancing. Because of prominent social figures such as Sigmund Freud, mothers are blamed for all of the neuroses of their children. This is a district rich in the man-haters and lesbians that refer to themselves as suffragettes. Women of this district are subjected to the male gaze while also being increasingly put into the public sphere by the imitation of the wartime conditions of the district, including the advent of communal childcare. It is because of the relatively large amounts of new rights that women in this district have that they write with a more openly angry tone. Now let's hear a little bit more from our tributes. First up is Maya Angelou of District 1. The anger and disdain in your book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, is glaringly obvious. Writing as a black woman in a district where African Americans and women have more rights but are still looked down upon, what gave you the courage to write something so forward?
Ever since I was a little girl, I knew I wouldn't let those peckerwoods hold me back. I worked hard my whole life, and when I was a young girl, it paid off in the form of a scholarship to study both dance and drama. The men, and especially the white men, were always trying to keep me down, and after watching 2 men I worked closely with, Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, assassinated, I almost lost my hope. But I realized that's what the white man wants. And I thought, why give up when I could stick it right to all of those men who tried to drag me down?
Thank you, Miss Angelou, for that angry answer. Next is Jane Austen of District 4. Jane, how do you think your family affected your ability and desire to write?
My family was the very reason I began my inquiries into writing, for without them I had not reason to write. While other families struggled to get by, mine was of a superior standing, not the highest of classes, but with more luxuries than many. Why, we were even able to afford for my dearest friend, confidant, and sister, Cassandra and I, to go to the grave without marriage. Oh, the tragedy of women who could support themselves, having no one but the other to love them. I'm not sure how I even survived. This, then, made my family my only audience, and what a supportive one, always reading my silly girl's tales with utmost interest.
Just think, maybe if they would have supported you less and put you in your rightful place more, you wouldn't be in your current predicament. Now we'll hear from District 2's Dejuna Barnes. Your district's streets are always filled with rioting women. How has this affected your outlook on competing in the games?
I have been forcibly fed. After such a tyrannous act that sent sensations of burning fire that burned into my very soul, there is no comparable act that the men of the games could commit against me. The women of my district are braver than any you could find in any corner of the universe. They continue to fight for the rights that we know we deserve, even as brutish men, dressed in blue, march in time, storming the protests of the women. The men are doing everything in their tiny imaginations to punish the women, sometimes even going to extremes like hosing the women down, but yet these brave suffragettes carry on, fighting with their last dying breaths for the rights they should be naturally afforded.
It is unfortunate that these women won't just learn their lesson. Let's have Charlotte Bronte of District 3 tell us a little bit about herself. How did your experiences in your early life affect your confidence in your ability to survive the games?
My early years drained both my body and my soul of their very energy. At the young age of 5 years old, my mother's dear life was stolen by cancer, leaving me in the care of my unforgiving Aunt Branwell. My sisters and I were sent away to a treacherous boarding school, and 2 more precious lives, those of my sisters, were claimed. These same conditions caused me and my other surviving sister, Emily, to have health problems, and I even suffered from a case of the same illness that prematurely swept away my sister. My imagination cannot create any situation that in which these men can steal from me anything that has not already been stolen. So, Allie, I have nothing but confidence in my abilities.
We'll see how accurate that confidence is. Now let's welcome Gwendolyn Brooks of District 1. Many people have commented on the unique style of your poetry, saying it is almost musical in its properties. How do you react to that?
It's real cool, the rhythm make 'em sway, but listen close to what I got to say. The rhythm don't tell what my words do, the music real cool, but no story do it tell. So listen to my words, not the music they evoke, for if you do this, you'll be wiser folk.
And now it's time to hear from Mary Shelley of District 4, supposed author of the classic novel Frankenstein. Many people believe that a person who was not only just a woman, but also a very young woman, could not possibly have written such a novel as Frankenstein, and some even say that your husband wrote it. What would you say to these people?
Well, once upon a time, there was a strange monster looming over all the men of the town and threatening their very existence. They were very wary of him, shooting him sidelong glances and closing off their businesses to him. What they did not know, however, was that he had talents beyond their imagination, creating beautiful paintings with vibrant colors weaving together to make the most striking images. The men of the town saw these paintings and could not believe that such a clumsy oaf with large overbearing hands could create something so stunning, so instead of altering their beliefs, they shunned the monster, saying cruel and malicious things about him, and doing this so much that the monster lost his hope completely.
Thank you for that seemingly unrelated story. Next is District 2's Charlotte Perkins Gilman, who will hopefully be a little more helpful. Charlotte, poor Charlotte, your husband took over control of your health after the birth of your first child, putting you on a rest treatment. Tell us a little bit more about that.
My dear husband Charles does know everything there is to know about everything, and he does just always have my best interest in mind, so one cannot fault him for leading me into such a strange treatment. After the birth of my first daughter, Catherine, my weak mind just could not cope. I found it impossible to talk, read, or even feed myself. All I seemed capable of was laying in bed day after day. After 9 weeks, my ever-loving husband sent me to a physician, whose advice was to keep my daughter with me at all times and to have no more than 2 hours of intellectual time per day. I was also not allowed, under any circumstances, to touch pen, brush, or paper again. I tried for my overbearing but loving husband's sake to maintain this treatment, but after months the mad woman in my head began to take over, placing thoughts of pistols and chloroform into my head. This woman was silenced only when Charles and I decided to divorce to placate the woman before she killed me.
Well, you're just a ray of sunshine, aren't you? Finally, we'll hear a little bit from George Eliot of District 3. Many people find it strange that you would choose to write under a male name, especially with what many have called your strongly masculine face. Do you have any response to this?
Some may call these false pretenses or find this strange, but I could not very well write the works that I did under the name of a woman, who, in my district, would have taken me seriously. They would have believed me to be just another lady novelist writing just another silly novel. In addition, I was not fond of the idea of outsiders meddling where they did not belong, sticking their noses into my personal life. As for my manly features, they are not something that can be helped, and if they will help to further my cause as an author, I will embrace them with all the love I can muster.
Oh my god. I'm gonna be late for my women's lit final.